Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked across his wheat field. The twin suns of Haven's Edge were setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He had been farming this land for 15 years now, ever since he left Earth to start a new life on the frontier. The work was hard but honest. The days were long but peaceful. He liked it that way. He was walking back to his farmhouse when he heard the crash. It came from the north field, beyond the hill where the old grain storage unit stood. Jake froze. His hand moved to the plasma cutter on his belt. It was not much of a weapon, but it was all he had. He moved carefully through the tall wheat, following the sound of labored breathing. What he found made him stop dead in his tracks. She was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, covered in silver fur with black streaks running down her back. Her face was like a wolf, but she stood upright like a human. Her amber eyes glowed in the fading light. She wore armor, dark and damaged, with burn marks across the chest plate. Blood soaked through a wound in her side. Jake had seen pictures of the Korvathi before. Everyone had. They were the warriors of the galaxy, the mercenaries that every empire hired when they needed fighters. But seeing one in person was completely different. She was terrifying and magnificent at the same time. The creature's eyes locked onto his. Her hand moved, lightning fast, and grabbed his wrist. Jake tried to pull away, but her grip was like iron. He expected pain, but her touch was surprisingly gentle. "Tell no one," she whispered. Her voice was rough, like gravel, but she spoke perfect English. "They are coming. The Convergence. They will offer you peace, prosperity, protection." Jake's heart hammered in his chest. "What are you talking about? Let me go. Listen to me, human." Her eyes burned with intensity. "I do not have much time. Your species is in terrible danger." Jake stopped struggling. Something in her voice, in her eyes, told him this was not a trick. This was not some raid or robbery. This was something else. Something worse. "My name is Kara," the alien continued. "I was a soldier for the Convergence. I believed in them. I fought for them. Until I learned the truth." "What truth?" Jake asked. His voice came out as barely a whisper. "The Convergence does not save species. They enslave them. They did it to my people. They have done it to 16 other species. And now they are doing it to yours." Jake shook his head. "That's crazy. The Convergence has been good to us. They gave us faster-than-light travel. They opened up trade routes. They protected our colonies from pirates." Kara's grip tightened slightly. "That is what they do. They help you. They make you dependent on them. Then when you cannot survive without them, they take everything. Your freedom, your choice, your future." "Why should I believe you?" Jake asked, though part of him already did. "Because I have the proof," Kara said. She released his wrist and reached into a pouch on her belt. She pulled out a small data chip no bigger than Jake's thumbnail. "This contains everything. Communications between Convergence leaders, plans for humanity, timelines, everything." She pressed the chip into Jake's palm. "In 3 months, the Convergence Council will propose something called the Consolidation Protocol to your leaders." "It sounds good. It sounds like partnership. But it is a trap. Once your government signs it, the Convergence will control your military, your economy, your laws. Everything." Jake stared at the tiny chip in his hand. "Why me? I'm just a farmer. Why not give this to someone important? A politician or a general or something?" Kara's expression softened slightly. "Because those people are already compromised. The Convergence has been working on them for years. Bribes, threats, promises, but you are nobody to them. Just a farmer on a frontier world. That makes you valuable. That makes you safe." "I don't understand," Jake said. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "Find Daniel Cortez on New Britannia Station. He will know what to do. He is part of the resistance. Tell him Kara sent you. Tell him the timeline has moved up." She coughed and blood flecked her lips. "And tell no one else. Trust no one in power. The Convergence has eyes everywhere." Jake helped her sit down against the old grain storage unit. "Let me get my medical kit." "I can help you." "No time," Kara said. But Jake was already running back to his house. He grabbed the emergency medical kit from under his sink and sprinted back to the field. When he returned, Kara was paler. Her breathing was shallow. Jake opened the kit with shaking hands. He had basic training, enough to handle farm injuries, but this was beyond him. Still, he did what he could. He cleaned the wound, applied synthetic skin, and injected her with painkillers. "Why are you helping me?" Kara asked as he worked. "I could be lying. I could be dangerous. Maybe. Jake said, focusing on wrapping the bandage. But I don't think so. And if what you're saying is true, then someone needs to know. Kara watched him with those intense amber eyes. You are brave, Jake Morrison. Braver than you know. How do you know my name? Your mailbox, she said with what might have been a smile. I passed it on my way in. Jake almost laughed, but then Kara's head snapped up. They found me. The tracking beacon in my armor. I thought I disabled it, but I was wrong. Jake heard it then. The high-pitched whine of engines. Lights appeared in the sky, moving fast. 3 ships, sleek and silver, bearing the symbol of the convergence. Hide the chip, Kara commanded. Now. Jake shoved the data chip deep into his pocket. Kara struggled to her feet, swaying. When they asked, tell them you heard a crash. You came to investigate. You found nothing. You saw nothing. What about you? Jake asked. I was never here. Kara limped toward the edge of the field, toward the forest beyond. Remember Jake Morrison. Danielle Cortez. New Britannia Station. 3 months. Tell no one. Then she was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. Jake barely had time to hide the medical kit before the convergence ships landed in his field. The downdraft from their engines flattened the wheat in a wide circle. Soldiers emerged. They were human, wearing convergence security uniforms. A woman with sharp features and cold eyes approached him. Are you the owner of this property? Yes, ma'am, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. Jake Morrison. What's going on? We're tracking a dangerous fugitive. A Korvathi mercenary who attacked a convergence facility. Have you seen anything unusual tonight? Jake forced himself to look confused. I heard a loud noise about 20 minutes ago. Sounded like it came from this field. I came out to check, thought maybe a meteor hit or something. But I didn't find anything. The woman studied him carefully. You're certain? No sign of anyone? No tracks, no blood? Nothing, Jake said. Just some flattened wheat. I figured whatever it was bounced off and kept going. The woman gestured to her team. Search the area. Full sweep. She turned back to Jake. We'll need to search your house as well. Standard procedure. Jake's heart sank, but he nodded. Of course. Whatever you need. The soldiers were thorough. They went through his house, his barn, his storage sheds. They scanned for heat signatures and biological traces. They questioned him 3 more times, asking the same questions in different ways, looking for inconsistencies. But Jake stuck to his story. He was just a farmer. He heard a noise. He found nothing. He knew nothing. After 2 hours, the woman finally seemed satisfied. If you see or hear anything unusual, contact Convergence Security immediately. The fugitive is extremely dangerous. I will, Jake promised. The ships lifted off, their lights disappearing into the night sky. Jake waited another hour, just to be sure they were really gone before he went back inside. He sat at his kitchen table and pulled out the data chip. It looked so small, so insignificant. Hard to believe it could contain proof of a galactic conspiracy. Jake Morrison was a simple man. He grew wheat. He fixed machinery. He lived alone and liked it that way. He was not a hero. He was not brave. He was certainly not someone who got involved in politics or military matters, but as he sat there holding that tiny chip, he thought about Kara's eyes, about the desperation and certainty in her voice, about the warning she had risked her life to deliver. 3 months. The Consolidation Protocol. Danielle Cortez. New Britannia Station. Jake closed his fist around the chip. He did not know if he believed everything Kara had told him. He did not know if he was brave enough to do what she asked. But he knew he could not ignore this. He could not pretend it never happened. Tomorrow he would book passage to New Britannia Station. He would find this Danielle Cortez, and he would figure out what the hell was really going on. Jake Morrison might have been just a farmer, but maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what humanity needed right now. Jake spent 2 weeks trying to convince himself that Kara had been delirious. Blood loss could make people say crazy things. Maybe the whole story was just the confused rambling of a wounded soldier. Maybe there was no conspiracy. Maybe the convergence really was as helpful and friendly as they seemed. But every time he tried to dismiss it, he would remember her eyes, the certainty in them, the fear. That was not delirium, that was truth. He began researching, carefully, quietly, using public terminals instead of his home computer. He did not know if the convergence was really watching him, but he was not taking chances. The first thing he looked into was Danielle Cortez. A simple search brought up a freight hauler operating out of New Britannia Station. The man had a clean record, ran cargo to the outer colonies. Nothing special. But Jake noticed something odd. Every few months, Cortez would file flight plans to remote systems with no obvious commercial value. Places where nobody lived. Places where there was nothing to trade. Then Jake started looking at the convergence itself. The more he dug, the more patterns he found. 12 years ago, they had arrived in human space, offering friendship and technology. The timing had been perfect. Humanity had just survived a brutal civil war. Earth and the colonies were exhausted, broke, and desperate for help. The convergence had provided everything: medicine, energy, faster ships, better weapons. They had asked for nothing in return except friendship and cooperation. But now Jake was looking closer. He found records of colony administrators who had been replaced, always at the convergence's suggestion. Always with someone more friendly to convergence interests. He found trade agreements that increasingly favored convergence corporations. He found military advisors on every human ship, supposedly there to help, but always present. The patterns were subtle. Easy to miss if you were not looking. But once Jake started looking, he could not stop seeing them. He checked news archives. 3 years ago, a human senator named Gregory Walsh had given a speech questioning humanity's dependence on convergence technology. He had called for more investment in independent research and development. 2 weeks later, he was caught in a corruption scandal and forced to resign. The evidence against him had been provided by convergence investigators. 5 years ago, a colony governor named Helen Price had refused to allow convergent security forces to operate on her world. She had argued that human security was sufficient. She died in a shuttle accident 3 months later. Mechanical failure, the report said. Jake found a dozen more examples. People who questioned the convergence too loudly tended to have very bad luck. He was scared. More scared than he had been when Kara collapsed in his field, because now he was starting to believe her. And if she was right, then humanity was in serious trouble. Jake booked passage to New Britannia Station. He told his neighbors he was going to buy new equipment. Nobody questioned it. He was just a farmer taking a business trip. The journey took 3 days. Jake spent most of it reviewing the data chip. He had rigged a simple reader from spare parts, making sure it was not connected to any network. What he found on the chip made his blood run cold. Communications between convergence officials discussing humanity like farmers discussing livestock. Timelines for integration. Strategies for removing troublesome leaders. Plans for the consolidation protocol, carefully worded to sound beneficial while actually granting total control. And historical records. 16 other species, all following the same pattern. First contact, friendly relations, growing dependence, the protocol, then centuries of servitude. Some of the species had tried to resist after signing the protocol. The convergence had crushed them, brutally, completely. The records were clinical, detached, describing the suppression of rebellions the way someone might describe fixing a broken machine. The Corvati had been the convergence's greatest success story. A warrior species proud and strong, now completely subservient, bred and trained to fight the convergence's wars. Kara's people had been free once. Now they were weapons. By the time Jake reached New Britannia Station, he was terrified. But he was also angry. The convergence had been lying to humanity for 12 years. They had been manipulating, controlling, preparing to trap an entire species. New Britannia Station was huge. A massive ring of metal and glass spinning in space, home to over 100,000 people. Jake had never been anywhere so crowded. Ships came and went constantly, bringing goods from across the galaxy. He found the bar where Cortez supposedly spent his time in the lower levels. The place was dark and smelled like cheap alcohol and old metal. The bartender was a rilken, a species that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. Jake spotted Cortez in a back booth. The man matched the photos Jake had found, mid-50s, with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore a flight jacket covered in patches from different colonies. Jake slid into the booth across from him. Daniel Cortez? The man looked up from his drink. His expression did not change. Who's asking? My name is Jake Morrison. I'm a farmer from Haven's Edge. Jake lowered his voice. Kara sent me. Cortez's eyes narrowed. His hand disappeared under the table, probably reaching for a weapon. Don't know anyone by that name. She's Korvathi, a soldier. She was wounded. She came to my farm 2 weeks ago. Jake pulled out the data chip and set it on the table. She gave me this. She said you would know what to do with it. Cortez stared at the chip for a long moment. Jake could see him calculating, deciding whether to trust this stranger. Finally, he grabbed the chip and stood up. Follow me, not here. Jake followed him through a maze of corridors. They went down maintenance shafts, through cargo bays, past areas that looked like they had been abandoned years ago. Finally, Cortez stopped at a wall that looked like all the others. He pressed his hand to a specific panel and a door slid open. Behind it was a room full of people and equipment. Computer terminals lined one wall. Communication equipment covered another. Maps and charts were spread across tables. A dozen people worked quietly, some human, some alien. This was the resistance. The people who had figured out the truth. A woman looked up from her terminal. She was in her 40s with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Danny, who is this? Says Kara sent him, Cortez replied. He handed her the data chip. Claims she gave him this. The woman's eyes widened. Kara's alive? Where is she? I don't know, Jake said. She was wounded. She came to my farm, gave me that chip, and told me to find Daniel. Then Convergent Security showed up looking for her. She ran. I haven't seen her since. The woman plugged the chip into a terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. As data scrolled across the screen, her face went pale. Oh my God, this is it. This is everything we've been looking for. What is it? Jake asked. She turned to face him. I'm Lisa Chen. I used to be a diplomat on Earth until I started asking the wrong questions. What you brought us is proof. Real, documented proof of everything the Convergence has been doing. Over the next hour, Lisa explained. The Resistance had known something was wrong for years. They had pieces of the puzzle, suspicious deaths, convenient scandals, odd patterns in Convergence behavior. But they had never been able to prove anything. Now they had proof. Communications showing the Convergence discussing humanity's subjugation. Internal documents outlining the real terms of the Consolidation Protocol. Historical records of what they had done to other species. The vote is scheduled for 3 weeks from now, Lisa said. We thought we had 3 months. Kara's data shows they moved up the timeline. They're worried. Something about humanity makes them nervous, so they're rushing. What makes us so special? Jake asked. An alien joined the conversation. It looked like a giant mantis, with multiple arms and compound eyes. When it spoke, the words came from a translator device. Humans are unpredictable. You adapt fast. You don't follow expected patterns. The Convergence prefers species they can control easily. You are difficult. This is Click Thoughts, Lisa explained. Their species was approached by the Convergence 50 years ago. They refused contact and went into isolation. They've been helping us from the shadows. We cannot let your species fall into the trap, Click Thoughts said. If the Convergence controls humanity, they will use you as weapons. Your adaptability, your aggression, your creativity, you would be perfect soldiers for their empire. Jake felt sick. So what do? We expose them, Lisa said. We have 3 weeks before the vote. We need to get this information to the public. Show everyone what the Convergence really is. How? Jake asked. They control most of the news networks. They have friends in every government. Who's going to believe us? That's where you come in, Cortez said. You're perfect. You're nobody. Just a farmer. No political connections. No agenda. If you present this evidence, people might actually listen. Jake shook his head. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not a politician. I can't do this. You already did, Lisa said gently. You could have ignored Kara. You could have turned over that chip to Convergence Security. You could have stayed on your farm and pretended none of this was real, but you didn't. You came here, you risked everything to do the right thing. That was different, Jake protested. That was just following instructions. This is asking me to stand in front of the whole galaxy and accuse the Convergence of crimes. The plan was insane. Jake knew it from the moment Lisa explained it. They were going to hijack the broadcast of the Consolidation Protocol vote. Billions of people across human space would be watching. Convergence officials would be there. Security would be tight, but it was their only chance. Once the protocol passed, the Convergence would have legal authority to silence anyone who opposed them. There would be no second chance. No do-overs. This was it. Casey Dunn was the key to making it work. She was 23 years old, a genius with computers, and possibly the best hacker Jake had ever met. She had been working on breaking through the Convergence's security systems for 8 months. Their encryption is good, Casey explained, her fingers dancing across multiple keyboards at once. But it's not perfect. They got lazy. They've been using the same protocols for decades because nobody has ever challenged them. That's their weakness. Jake spent his days practicing. Lisa and Cortez drilled him over and over. How to present the information clearly. How to anticipate questions. How to stay calm when people attacked him. How to speak so that regular people would understand and believe. You can't sound like a conspiracy theorist, Lisa coached him. You can't sound angry or scared. You need to sound like what you are. A regular person who stumbled onto something terrible and decided to do the right thing. It was harder than Jake expected. Every time he practiced, he wanted to scream. He wanted to rage at the injustice of it all. But Lisa was right. Anger would not convince anyone. Clear, calm truth might. The night before the vote, Kara appeared at their hidden base. Jake almost did not recognize her at first. She looked thinner. Her wound had healed, but she moved carefully like she was still in pain. But her eyes were as fierce as ever. You came back, Lisa said, clearly surprised. I said I would help, Kara replied. The Korvathi resistance has made a decision. We will act when you act. If you expose the truth tomorrow, we will do the same across Convergence space. They cannot silence everyone at once. They'll kill you for this, Cortez said bluntly. Kara's expression did not change. My people are already dead. We have been dying slowly for 50 years, one generation at a time. Our children grow up knowing nothing but service to the Convergence. Better to die fighting than to watch another species fall into the same trap. She looked at Jake. Are you ready, farmer? No, Jake admitted. I'm terrified. But I'm going to do it anyway. Good, Kara said. Fear keeps you sharp. Keeps you careful. Just don't let it stop you. The day of the vote arrived. Earth Parliament was packed. Delegates from every colony, diplomats from dozens of species, and Convergence observers filled the chamber. The galleries were crowded with press and spectators. The whole thing was being broadcast live across human space and beyond. The Consolidation Protocol was the first item on the agenda. The speaker, a dignified woman named Victoria Cole, stood at the podium. Today we vote on Resolution 847, also known as the Consolidation Protocol. This measure will formalize our partnership with the Galactic Convergence and ensure the security and prosperity of all human worlds. I now open the floor for debate. Several delegates stood up ready to speak in favor of the protocol. They had prepared speeches, charts and graphs showing the benefits, testimonials from Convergence officials. Everything was choreographed, professional, designed to make the vote seem like an obvious choice. Casey sat in the resistance base, her eyes locked on multiple screens. 30 seconds, she whispered. Her hands moved across the keyboard. 20 seconds, 10-5. She hit enter. Every screen in Parliament went dark. The main display, the delegates' tablets, the press cameras, everything. For a moment, there was confused silence. Then Jake's face appeared on every single screen. My name is Jake Morrison, he began. His voice was steady despite the terror coursing through him. I am a farmer from Haven's Edge Colony. 3 weeks ago, I was given information that every human needs to see. I didn't want to believe it. I spent days trying to convince myself it wasn't true. But it is true, and you deserve to know. In Parliament, chaos erupted. Delegates shouted. Convergence officials jumped to their feet. Security started moving toward the technical booths. But Casey had locked them out of the system. For the next 10 minutes, nobody could stop the broadcast. Jake presented the evidence. He showed the communications between Convergence officials, discussing humanity like merchandise to be acquired. He showed the historical records of 16 other species that had accepted similar protocols. He showed the real terms hidden in the Consolidation Protocol, the clauses that would give the Convergence control over human military forces, economic policy, and government leadership. The Convergence has been very kind to us, Jake said, his voice carrying to billions of viewers. They gave us technology. They opened trade routes. They protected our colonies. But every single thing they gave us came with strings attached. We became dependent on them, and now they're asking us to make that dependence permanent. He displayed the timeline. The pattern repeated across 17 species. First contact, aid and friendship, growing dependence, the protocol, then subjugation. Sometimes it took decades, sometimes centuries, but it always ended the same way. Look at the Korvathi, Jake said, and Kara's image appeared on screen. They were a free people once, warriors, explorers, artists. The Convergence offered them the same partnership they're offering us. The Korvathi accepted. 50 years later, they're soldiers for the Convergence Empire. Their children are raised in training camps. Their culture is disappearing. Their freedom is gone. In Parliament, Convergence Ambassador Thalen, a tall being with blue skin and silver eyes, was shouting for security to cut the feed, but nothing worked. Casey had total control. Jake showed the internal Convergence documents, the ones discussing what made humanity dangerous: human unpredictability, human adaptability, human stubbornness. The Convergence wanted humanity controlled before they realized their own potential, before they became a threat. They're moving faster with us than any other species, Jake explained. The original timeline had the protocol vote scheduled for 3 months from now. They moved it up. They're rushing. Why? Because they're afraid. They're afraid that if we have too much time, we'll figure out what they're doing. They're afraid that humans won't be as easy to control as other species. Security forces burst into the resistance base. Kara met them at the door with several other Korvathi warriors. The fighting was brutal and fast. Jake could hear it through the communication link, but he kept talking. He had to finish. "I'm not asking you to hate the Convergence," Jake said. "I'm not asking you to cut off all relations with them. I'm just asking you to wait, to investigate, to make sure that when we commit to this partnership, we're doing it with our eyes open, with full knowledge of what we're agreeing to." He looked directly into the camera. "We're human. We've survived plagues and wars and disasters. We've colonized hostile worlds. We've rebuilt after collapse. We're tough. We're smart. We're adaptable. We don't need someone to save us. We need the truth. And then we need the freedom to make our own choice." The feed cut off. Security had finally broken through Casey's defenses. But it did not matter. Jake had said everything he needed to say. The message was out. In the resistance base, Kara grabbed Jake's arm. "We have to go, now." They ran through the maintenance corridors. Behind them, Convergent security forces were closing in. Ahead, a ship waited at a hidden docking port. The same Korvathi rebels who had brought Kara to the station were ready to get them out. The escape was desperate. Security ships pursued them as they fled the station. Laser fire lit up space around them. But the Korvathi pilot was skilled and the ship was fast. They made it to a jump point and escaped into faster-than-light travel just as Convergence warships arrived. Jake collapsed into a seat, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. Did it work? Did enough people see? Lisa checked her portable terminal, accessing news feeds through encrypted channels. Her eyes widened. "Jake, it's everywhere. Every news network, every social media platform. People are talking about nothing else." She showed him the screen. Videos of his broadcast were being shared millions of times per second. News anchors were discussing the evidence. Political analysts were examining the consolidation protocol with new suspicion. Colony governments were issuing statements, but the reaction was divided. Some people believed Jake immediately. Others called him a liar and a terrorist. The Convergence had issued a statement calling the evidence fabricated, claiming Jake was a disturbed individual with a grudge. Several delegates in Parliament had demanded an immediate halt to the vote pending investigation. Others, clearly in the Convergence's pocket, wanted to proceed as planned. The session had devolved into chaos. "The vote's been postponed," Cortez said, reading another update. "At least for now. They're forming a committee to investigate the allegations. It's a start, Lisa said. But this is far from over. The Convergence won't just accept this. They'll fight back hard, she was right. Within hours, character attacks on Jake began appearing in the media. Anonymous sources claimed he had financial problems, that he was mentally unstable, that he had been radicalized by extremists. The weeks following the broadcast were chaos. Jake watched from hiding as human space tore itself apart over his revelation. Some colonial governments immediately began distancing themselves from the Convergence. They canceled contracts, expelled advisors, and demanded answers. Others doubled down on their support, calling Jake a liar and a terrorist. The resistance established a mobile base on a captured freighter. They moved constantly, jumping from system to system to avoid Convergence hunters. Every few days they would receive news of someone else being arrested or disappearing. People who had spoken out in support of Jake's message. People who had asked too many questions. The Convergence was tightening its grip. They claimed they were maintaining order during a time of crisis. They positioned security forces at key stations and colonies. They offered protection to governments that remained loyal, and anyone who resisted too loudly had a habit of meeting unfortunate accidents. Jake had become a symbol. Half of humanity saw him as a hero who had exposed a terrible conspiracy. The other half saw him as a dangerous radical who had destabilized everything for personal gain. He could not go anywhere without being recognized, could not show his face without risking capture. The bounty on his head was enormous. 10 million credits, enough to make anyone retire for life. The Convergence wanted him badly, but support was growing too. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. People demanded transparency from their governments. They demanded answers about the consolidation protocol. They demanded proof that the Convergence was really what it claimed to be. The investigation into Jake's allegations moved slowly. Too slowly. The committee was made up of politicians, half of whom clearly had Convergence connections. They questioned every piece of evidence. They called expert witnesses who testified that the documents could have been fabricated. They dragged their feet at every opportunity. Meanwhile, Kara brought news from the Korvathi front. Her people's rebellion was spreading. Decades of suppressed anger had finally exploded into open warfare. Korvathi soldiers were deserting from Convergence forces. Korvathi civilians were attacking Convergence facilities. Entire planets were in revolt. The Convergence responded with overwhelming force. They deployed massive military assets to crush the uprising. Orbital bombardments, mass arrests, public executions meant to serve as warnings. The death toll climbed into the millions. They are making an example of us, Kara said, her voice tight with rage and grief. They want other species to see what happens when you rebel. They want to break us so thoroughly that nobody else dares to try. Jake felt the weight of it crushing him. This is my fault. If I had not broadcast that message, the Korvathi would not have risen up. All those people would still be alive. No, Kara said sharply. Those people died because the Convergence enslaved them. You did not pull the trigger. You did not give the orders. You simply told the truth. The blood is on Convergence hands, not yours. Lisa entered the common area with urgent news. Jake, you need to see this. Admiral Karen Stone just sent us an encrypted message. Admiral Stone commanded the Third Fleet, one of humanity's largest military formations. She was a decorated officer, respected across the colonies, and according to her message, she wanted to talk to Jake. They arranged a secure communication channel. Stone's face appeared on screen. She was in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. Mr. Morrison, she said, I'm going to be direct. Half my officers want to arrest you. The other half want to give you a medal. But I've spent the last 3 weeks reviewing your evidence with my intelligence staff. It checks out. All of it. Jake felt a surge of relief. Then you believe me? I believe the evidence, Stone corrected. Which means we have a serious problem. The Convergence has been manipulating humanity for over a decade. They've embedded themselves in our government, our military, our economy. And in 2 days, Parliament is scheduled to vote on the consolidation protocol again. 2 days? Lisa exclaimed. That's not enough time. The investigation is not even complete. The investigation was never meant to be complete, Stone said grimly. It was meant to be theater. Give the appearance of due diligence while the Convergence works behind the scenes to secure votes. They've been bribing, threatening, and promising. They're going to ram this through before more people start asking difficult questions. What can we do? Jake asked. Stone leaned forward. I have 6 fleet commanders who are willing to back a more aggressive approach. We bring our ships to Earth orbit. We demand that Parliament conduct a real independent investigation. We make it clear that the military will not enforce a protocol that was passed under false pretenses. That's a coup, Cortez said flatly. That's protecting humanity from a hostile foreign power, Stone countered. We swore an oath to defend against all enemies. I'm starting to think the biggest enemy has been pretending to be our friend. Over the next 2 days, the plan came together. Admiral Stone was not the only senior officer who had doubts. Across the fleet, commanders were questioning their convergence advisors. They were reviewing the evidence Jake had presented. They were asking themselves if they were serving humanity or serving the convergence. More fleets declared their support. The 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 7th fleets, plus colonial defense forces from a dozen worlds. It was not a majority of humanity's military, but it was substantial. The day of the vote arrived. Parliament convened under heavy security. Delegates took their positions. The convergence ambassadors sat in their gallery, confident and calm. They had the votes. They had spent weeks securing them. Then Admiral Stone's fleet arrived in Earth orbit, followed by more fleets, followed by more. Hundreds of warships all broadcasting the same message. Stone's face appeared on every screen in Parliament and across human space. This is Admiral Karen Stone of the 3rd Fleet. I speak for the commanders and crews of the assembled vessels. We call for an immediate halt to the consolidation protocol vote. We demand a full independent investigation into convergence activities in human space. We demand transparency and truth. The Parliament chamber erupted. Some delegates cheered. Others shouted accusations of treason. Convergence Ambassador Thalen stood, his blue face flushed darker with anger. This is an act of rebellion. These ships and their crews will be considered hostile forces. By whose authority? Stone shot back. We're human ships protecting human interests. You have no authority to declare us hostile. The Convergence Council will not tolerate this insubordination, Thalen said coldly. Ships are already en route to deal with your mutiny. Let them come, Stone replied. We're not afraid of the convergence anymore, and neither should anyone else be. For 3 days, Earth orbit was a standoff. Stone's coalition of fleets on one side, convergence forces and their human allies on the other. Both sides armed. Both sides ready. The entire galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if humans would start killing each other over this. More fleets arrived, but they were not convergence fleets. They were colonial defense forces. Independent ships, merchant vessels that had armed themselves. Thousands of ships from across human space, all declaring support for Stone's demands. The tide was turning. What the convergence had dismissed as a fringe movement was revealing itself as a groundswell. The majority of humanity, once they saw the truth, rejected the convergence's control. On the 4th day, the convergence blinked. Ambassador Thalen appeared before Parliament, his expression carefully neutral. The convergence wishes to resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding peacefully. We agree to a temporary withdrawal of our advisory personnel while an independent investigation is conducted. We welcome the opportunity to prove our good intentions. It sounded like a compromise. It sounded reasonable. But Jake knew better. They're regrouping, he told Lisa and Kara. They're pulling back to reassess. This is not over. No, Kara agreed. But you won this battle. That matters. The convergence withdrew their forces. Their advisors left human ships and stations. Their security personnel departed from colonies. For the first time in 12 years, human space was truly independent. But the scars remained. The investigation revealed the full scope of convergence manipulation. Decades of careful work building dependencies. Bribes totaling billions of credits. Blackmail files on hundreds of officials. Evidence of assassinations and sabotage. Several high-ranking humans were arrested for collaboration. Others fled to convergence space. The government had to be partially rebuilt. Trust was shattered. Jake watched it all unfold. He had started this. One farmer with a data chip and enough courage to speak up. He had exposed the truth. He had sparked a revolution. But the cost had been enormous. The Korvathi rebellion was still raging. Millions dead. Entire cities destroyed. The convergence was punishing them brutally for their defiance. On human worlds, families were divided. People who had believed in the convergence felt betrayed. People who had opposed it felt vindicated but not victorious. The economy was struggling as humanity tried to replace convergence technology and infrastructure. Was it worth it? Jake asked Kara one night. They stood in the observation deck of their ship watching the stars. That depends, Kara said. Would you rather struggle as a free being or prosper as a slave? 6 months after the convergence withdrawal, Jake Morrison stood in his wheat field again. The crop was thin this year. He had been gone for too long, and the automated systems had broken down. But it was growing. Slowly, stubbornly, the wheat was coming back. Just like humanity, Jake thought. The aftermath of the revelation had been harder than anyone expected. 12 years of integration with the convergence had created deep dependencies. Medicine was a major problem. Many treatments required convergence compounds that were no longer available. Human scientists were working desperately to find alternatives, but people were suffering in the meantime. Energy was another crisis. Convergence fusion reactors powered most colonies. Without replacement parts and maintenance, some were failing. Several colonies had experienced blackouts. A few had been evacuated entirely. The economy was struggling. Trade routes that had relied on convergence guarantees were disrupted. Businesses that had used convergence technology were scrambling to adapt. Unemployment was rising. Food shortages were appearing in some regions. Jake heard the complaints every day. People angry about the hardship. People who wished he had never exposed the truth. People who thought prosperity under the convergence would have been better than freedom and struggle. He understood their anger. He even sympathized with it. But he did not regret his choice. A ship landed near his farmhouse. Admiral Stone emerged, now formally leading the new Human Defense Initiative. She had resigned from the regular fleet to build a military force specifically designed to operate without convergence technology. Jake, she greeted him. I was in the sector and thought I would check in. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Jake said. The farm is recovering slowly. Stone looked across the field. It's a good metaphor, we're all recovering slowly. She turned to him. I wanted you to know, we've made contact with 3 other species that escaped convergence control. They're willing to share technology and establish trade. We're not completely alone, that was good news. Humanity needed allies, needed trade partners who were not trying to manipulate them. There's more, Stone continued. The Korvathi rebellion is gaining ground. With our support, they've liberated 4 of their homeworlds. Kara asked me to tell you that her people are finally fighting their way to freedom. Jake felt a mix of relief and worry. How many have died? Too many, Stone admitted. The convergence does not surrender territory easily. But the Korvathi are winning. And other species are watching. Some are starting to question their own relationship with the convergence. That was the real victory, Jake realized. Not just that humanity had escaped the trap, but that they had shown other species it was possible. The convergence's greatest weapon had always been the illusion of inevitability. The belief that resistance was futile. Jake had shattered that illusion. Over the following months, Jake watched humanity adapt. Human engineers developed alternative power sources to replace convergence reactors. Human doctors found new treatments to replace convergence medicine. Human pilots learned to navigate without convergence beacons. It was hard. It was expensive. People suffered during the transition, but humanity was learning to stand on its own feet. Jake received an invitation to speak at the inaugural session of something called the Free Worlds Assembly. 30 species, all of whom had either escaped or resisted convergence control, were gathering on New Britannia Station to form a coalition. He almost declined. He was a farmer, not a diplomat. But Lisa convinced him to go. You started this, she said. People need to see that ordinary individuals can make a difference. That you don't need to be a politician or a general to change the galaxy. New Britannia Station was transformed for the occasion. The dingy lower levels where Jake had first met the resistance were cleaned up. The main hall was decorated with flags from 30 different worlds, representing 30 different species. Jake saw Click Thoughts, the mantis-like alien whose people had refused convergence contact. He saw Korvathi warriors, including Kara, who had become a symbol of resistance across the galaxy. He saw humans from across the colonies, representing worlds that had chosen freedom over comfort. The assembly opened with speeches from various leaders. They talked about cooperation and mutual defense, about sharing technology and resources, about standing together against the convergence's attempts to control them. Then it was Jake's turn to speak. He walked to the podium, looking out at the assembled representatives. Beings from 30 worlds, all different, all united by one thing. They had chosen freedom. 2 years ago, Jake began, I was just a farmer. I grew wheat. I fixed broken equipment. I lived a quiet life on a frontier world. Then a wounded Korvathi warrior collapsed in my field and told me a truth that changed everything. He saw Kara in the audience. She nodded slightly. She told me that the convergence was not what it seemed, that the help they offered came with a price too high to pay. She gave me evidence and told me to find people who could use it. I was terrified. I almost did nothing. It would have been easier to pretend I never saw her, never heard her warning. Jake paused, letting his words sink in. But I didn't. And that choice, that one decision by one ordinary person, started something bigger than I could have imagined. It sparked a movement, a revolution, a complete change in how humanity saw the galaxy. He looked around the hall. Everyone in this room made a similar choice. You could have accepted the convergence's offer. You could have chosen security over freedom. Many species did. But you said no. You chose the harder path, and that choice matters. Jake's voice grew stronger. The convergence controls hundreds of worlds. They have fleets that outnumber ours by 100 to 1. They have resources we can barely comprehend. By every measure, we should be hopeless. We should surrender before the fight even begins. He smiled. But we won't. Because we have something the convergence doesn't understand. We have the will to be free. We have the courage to stand alone. We have the strength to endure hardship rather than accept comfortable slavery. The delegates were listening intently now. The road ahead will not be easy. The convergence will not forgive us for escaping their control. They will bring economic pressure. They will bring military force. They will try to divide us, to make us doubt ourselves, to convince us that we made the wrong choice. Jake's voice grew fierce, but we will face it together. As equals, as allies, as free peoples. We will help each other. We will defend each other. We will build a future where species cooperate because they choose to, not because they're forced to. He finished simply. We are here because we chose freedom over comfort. Because we would rather struggle together than prosper apart. Because we believe that liberty is worth any price. The convergence wanted to control us. Instead, we will show them and the entire galaxy what free peoples can accomplish when they stand together. The hall erupted in applause. Representatives from 30 worlds stood cheering. Jake felt overwhelmed. He was still just a farmer. But somehow he had become a symbol of something larger. After the session, Kara approached him. You have come far, Jake Morrison. From the terrified human hiding a data chip in his pocket to the voice of free worlds. I'm still terrified, Jake admitted. The convergence isn't going to let this stand. They'll come for us eventually. Let them come, Kara said. We will be ready. And this time we will not fight alone. The Free Worlds Assembly formally established itself over the next week. They created a mutual defense pact. They agreed to share technology and resources. They established trade agreements based on actual equality, not manipulation. It was not perfect. 30 species with different cultures, different needs, different goals trying to work together was messy. There were arguments. There were misunderstandings. There were conflicts that had to be resolved, but they were trying. And that was more than the convergence had ever allowed. Jake returned to Haven's Edge after the assembly. His farm was waiting. The wheat was tall now, golden in the sunlight. He had missed the harvest season, but there would be others. Lisa contacted him a few weeks later. She had taken a position with the Human Diplomatic Corps, building relationships with the new allies. We're making progress, she told him. Slowly, but it's real progress. Built on honesty instead of manipulation. Cortez was running legitimate cargo now, no longer hiding from convergence hunters. Casey had joined the Human Defense Initiative, helping develop secure communication systems that the convergence could not crack. Admiral Stone was training a new generation of officers, teaching them to think independently instead of relying on convergence advisors. They had all moved on, building new lives in a free galaxy. Jake was content to return to farming. He had done his part. He had told the truth when it mattered. Now he wanted to go back to the quiet life he had always preferred. But he knew that quiet life existed only because people like Kara had been brave enough to warn him. Because people like Lisa and Cortez had been brave enough to fight. Because people like Stone had been brave enough to put their ships between humanity and subjugation. One evening, Jake stood in his field watching the sunset. The twin suns of Haven's Edge painted the sky in brilliant colors. It was beautiful, peaceful, free, his communicator chimed. It was a message from the Free World's Assembly. They wanted him to serve as a